The South Carolina game is in the books, so that means it's time to move on to the greatest time of the year, the Iron Bowl week with Alabama. You know what that means? At the time of every start of the week, we've got a press conference with head football coach Bryan Harsin of Auburn. Let's take a look at some of the questions he was asked, his responses, and offer some analysis. Welcome to the E2C network, where the Auburn family speaks. Our content here and on our podcast network may tend to be Auburn sports heavy, but if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you never miss any content, and thank you to members of our booster club like Chris Smith who help produce videos like this. I always want to remind you that it's a good idea to go check out the press conference in full so you don't have anything taken out of context, you're not missing anything, you have the full range of what was asked, what was said, because what I'm going to be doing here is offering you a shortened version of that because I'm aware a lot of you don't have the time or the desire to listen to a full press conference and hear a lot of coach speak sometimes. I'm going to condense some of the questions and responses so that we kind of save a little bit of time here because a lot of it sometimes is repeated either by the questions that are asked or by the coach himself. He always opens up with his thoughts about the previous game and the one coming up. Now, what was interesting is last week he spent no time at all at the then time upcoming game, South Carolina, talking about that. This time, he basically spent most of his time talking about Alabama. It's an interesting dynamic and contrast with what happened last week as to this week, and that's just a small thing you may be like, oh, well, that's kind of nitpicking, but I just found it very, very interesting. No response, no discussion in his opening about South Carolina last week, and this week he actually focused basically all his time on the upcoming game. I mean, it's Alabama. It kind of warrants that, don't you think? There were less stories coming out of the game, big injuries and things like that. And there was no really need to repeat about some of the same issues in his opening statements because we all know what the issues is. They do too. It's just a matter of fixing them at this point. So we focused most of our time talking about Alabama. Coach Harsin has gotten a chance to watch Bryce Young, especially when he was being recruited by all the different schools. And what he notes is how he's improved since that time, which I think goes to show you why Bryce Young is considered, one of these highly touted recruits, is very favored for Heisman recognition right now because they recognize his talent, but he hasn't been unbeatable. And I think that is something to note when Coach Harsin says that he's improved, that there's some things that he does that Auburn might be able to take advantage of. A couple other players that he talked about that we all need to keep our eyes on: wide receivers Williams and Mechie, running back Brian Robinson, offensive tackle Evan Neal, and then on defensive side of things, Henry To'o, Will Anderson, and Jordan Battle. All names we're very familiar with, and they have a plethora of talent and weapons to use on their team. More specifically for Auburn when it comes to the Iron Bowl, Coach said this is the time now to bring everything that they've been working on, the mistakes that they've been making, and the corrections they've been trying to put into place throughout this whole season need to culminate in this game, not just because it's Alabama, because it's the end of the season. That's your whole point. You need a trajectory heading in the right direction, and hopefully that can culminate in the very last game of the regular season. In terms of schedule stuff, he said it'll basically be the same week outside of obviously Thursday being Thanksgiving, where they'll have one short practice in the morning, and then players are going to be free to go spend time with family if they can, and those that can are going to be welcome to the coaches' houses for a Thanksgiving meal. Now on to the questions. One of the first one that was asked is about redshirt players. There's a lot of people focused on why aren't we playing this player, that player, and obviously most people when we say that think about Demetrius Davis. So while he was never referred to in the question or the answer here, we all know what everybody was talking about in this sense. When asked about the redshirt players, it was an interesting contrast between last week and this week where he said, no, there's no plans to use even a specific player like Demetrius Davis. Here he said, we'll just see how the week goes. Take that for what it means, Auburn fans. Maybe you will see some of those favorite players that have been redshirted that you want to. I don't know. A lot of questions about his thoughts on his first Iron Bowl, just being a part of this whole pageantry of this part of college football. He said this is one of the reasons he even said yes to coming to Auburn was to get to play and coach in this game. First question he was actually asked after his opening press conference as the hire was made was about the Iron Bowl and his thoughts on playing Alabama. And I think what you notice when he was talking about this is there's a hint of balancing the focus between, yes, this is Alabama, this is the most important game of the year for us for many aspects, not just because it's a rivalry game, but because, honestly, everything goes through them at this point these days. But he also wants us to focus on still just getting better and not put so much of the emphasis on Alabama specifically. He was asked about how he assessed TJ after he'd had some more time to watch it. He said he was solid, but still many things to clean up. And he kind of went into a discussion after this question about how the quarterback position needs to prepare much differently than others. And at the end of this, you kind of catch himself saying, hey, this is not necessarily a discussion about TJ and whether he is or not doing those things. But I kind of think that you wouldn't bring that up if that wasn't the case. And what that tells me is that not necessarily about effort or anything like that. I'm not questioning that about TJ. It's just Bo across the board has done things better, TJ, in all areas of being a quarterback, whether that's preparing, leading, whether that's on the field production. And granted, he has had more time to do that. But still, the whole package has just been a little bit better for Bo, which is why we haven't seen TJ out there as a starter unless the necessity arose. He was asked about how to stop Bryce Young. We talked about him being a very good talent, but still some improvements to make, and has already improved since high school, as Harsin has already said. They have to decrease the time he's allowed to sit in the pocket, which is going to be hard with players like Evan Neal, their offensive tackle. You also have to have the rest of the defense in position. Key thing there, everyone's got to know their role and shut their hole, which is one of my favorite phrases out there. Be in position, and you got to be able to account for all the weapons. 3 things right there, success. Can't be that hard, right? The problem is all of these things are super deadly. Whether it's Bryce Young just being given time, whether it's the D being positioned for us, or whether it's just trying to keep track of Brian Robinson, Mechie, Williams, you name it, they've got talent everywhere. Couple special teams updates. Ben Patton will continue to be the first option at field goals. Now, what was interesting is he said that Evan McGuire is still going to have a shot at doing some kickoff situations. Now, this may be because of kind of the, not necessarily miscues, it was his first time out there that we saw a couple of times, but we're going to need to probably kick this ball into the end zone. We'll talk about why in just a second. So Evan McGuire maybe has a stronger leg. I don't know. I haven't analyzed them enough. So he's definitely going to at least get a look further at kickoffs. He was asked about the continual pattern of falling apart in the last 3 games, especially in the second half. He said it's a twofold answer. Players have to respond, but the coaches have to adjust. He went into another long response about this where you can tell there's a lot of frustration, not just for him, but he recognizes for everyone else involved as well. And it really is a true statement that it is twofold, because the coaches can adjust all they want, but if the players don't respond to those adjustments, it's never going to look like they made any. On the flip side, the players can respond, but if they're not put in the right situations and adjustments, then it's going to look like the players didn't respond at all. So everyone, when we start criticizing coaches, when we start criticizing players, we need to recognize that fact that it's a twofold situation. It always has been. It's just easier to blame one or the other in the moment. Big factor in this game is going to be special teams, especially like we already talked about for us. But when you talk about Alabama's special team, you need to look no further than Williams on kickoff returns, who has been very good this year so far, which we have also been pretty good in coverage. It's been one of the more consistent aspects of our special teams in terms of kickoff return coverage. Jarquez Hunter, go figure, last game had an outstanding game. Coach even praised him for that, getting down there and making some tackles early on. You got to love a guy who's seen some time and some, energy and just effort on every aspect that he's been involved in, whether it's been running back, now on kickoff returns. I love just putting athletes on the field. There is going to be a need to kick this thing a little bit further and get it into the end zone, so we limit the amount of times he has the ability to run this thing back, which is why you're probably seeing Evan factor a little bit more into the decisions on kickoffs this week. And then, of course, punt return adjustments for Auburn. Simply put, catch the ball. And if you can't catch it, protect your team when you can't. It's as simple as that. It's been very frustrating to see Demetrius Robinson have this maybe questionable decision-making on this, but he is such a talented athlete, and you hate not to put him out there. But if these situations continue to rise, you got to change something, or he's got to change something at least. Last question was about the lack of the tight ends this last game. South Carolina, coach said, took it away from them a lot. However, the situations never really arose to use them more often. And then the other problem was when they did use them, they either didn't catch it or they didn't have it thrown to them well. So it was really a threefold problem that just kept compounding on itself, taking away one of the better parts of our passing game this season. So that's all the questions and comments and my summary of everything for Coach Harsin's press conference for Iron Bowl week. I want to know what you thought about my responses, but also what you thought about his press conference as a whole. Let me know down there in the comments section below. If you enjoy this type of content, please help support it by smashing that like button. If you want more content from us, be sure to hit the subscribe and notification bell so you never miss an upload or live stream. There's other ways to help support our content, such as they're listed in the description. You can become a channel member or a Booster Club member. Both start at $1 a month and help produce this content. Thank you for tuning into the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. War Eagle.